Maps are supposed to tell the truth. They show us where we are. They guide our journeys. They shape how we see the world. But what if maps lie? Not just small mistakes, but deep distortions of size, shape, power, and history. The maps you saw in school didn't just educate you. They shaped your worldview. They made some countries look bigger, others smaller, some central, others forgotten. And the strange part? It wasn't always by accident. This video explores 10 maps, or rather 10 ways maps have misled you. From colonial cartography to modern manipulations, these aren't just geography errors. They're lessons in perception, politics, and power. This is Lesson Lost, and these are the maps that lied to you about the world. Let's begin. 1. The Mercator projection. When you think of a map, one image probably comes to mind. A rectangular view of the world. 1. Africa in the center. 2. North America on the left. 3. Europe comfortably perched above it all. 4. And Antarctica as a thin strip at the bottom. That image is called the Mercator projection, and it's one of the most used maps in the world. It's also one of the most misleading. The Mercator map was created in 1569 by a European cartographer named Gerardus Mercator. It was designed for navigation, to help sailors cross oceans using straight lines. For that purpose, it was brilliant. But for representing the actual size of countries and continents, it's a complete failure. Here's why. The Earth is a sphere. Trying to flatten a sphere into a rectangle without distortion is mathematically impossible. So any flat map involves trade-offs. The Mercator projection preserves direction but distorts size badly. The farther you get from the equator, the more inflated things become. Let's look at some shocking examples. In reality, Africa is 14 times larger. Mexico is nearly twice the size of Alaska. India is actually larger than all of Western Europe combined. Its shape and size are stretched beyond recognition. But here's the deeper problem. This distortion isn't just geographic, it's psychological. By making Europe and North America look larger and more central, the Mercator map reinforces a Eurocentric worldview. It subtly tells your brain, 1. These places are more important. 2. These countries matter more. 3. Others are smaller, less significant, or even invisible. And for centuries, this has been the standard classroom map in most Western countries. Think about that. Millions of children learn geography from a map that literally shrinks the global south and enlarges the west. Was this intentional? Partly yes, partly no. Mercator himself didn't set out to make a political map, but later governments and institutions chose it for that reason. It helped reinforce colonial hierarchies. It made imperial powers feel big, dominant, central. Even today, many online maps, weather forecasts, and news graphics use Mercator, even though better alternatives exist. Why? Because we've been conditioned to see the world this way. And changing it means changing how we understand power, proximity, and perspective. The Mercator projection isn't just a map, it's a lens. And once you learn to spot the distortion, you realize you were never looking at the world as it really is. 2. Greenland is not that big. If you've ever looked at a standard world map, you've probably seen Greenland, that big white island near the top. On most maps, it looks massive, about the same size as Africa, maybe even bigger than Australia. A frozen giant looming in the north. But here's the truth. Greenland is nowhere near that big. Let's break it down with actual numbers. 1. Greenland's real size, approximately 2. 1 million square kilometers. That means Africa is more than 14 times larger. Yet, on the Mercator projection, the most common map in schools and media, Greenland and Africa look almost equal. And it gets worse. Greenland looks similar in size, but in reality, South America is 8 times larger on many maps. Greenland seems larger, but Australia is more than 3 times its size. So what's going on? The answer lies in latitude distortion. Greenland sits near the Arctic Circle. The Mercator map stretches land masses the farther they are from the equator. That means countries near the poles get visually inflated, while equatorial nations get compressed. Greenland is one of the biggest victims, or beneficiaries, of this distortion. It appears huge, commanding, almost intimidating. But in reality, it's a relatively small, sparsely populated island covered in ice. Why does this matter? Because size shapes perception. When we see a country or region as large on a map, our brain assigns it more importance, more power, more influence. Maps are not just about geography. They are visual politics. By showing Greenland as oversized and Africa as tiny, traditional maps quietly reinforce old colonial hierarchies. They suggest that the world is led from the north, that the south is small, less important, secondary, even though reality says the opposite. The global south is bigger, richer in resources, and home to billions. But on the map, it's minimized. So next time you see Greenland dominating the top of the map, remember this: it's not that big. It never was. And the map is lying to you. 3. Africa, the most misrepresented continent. If there's one continent that maps have treated the worst, in size, in shape, and in symbolism, it's Africa. Let's start with the numbers. 1. Africa is the second largest continent on Earth. 2. It covers over 30 million square kilometers. 3. It's larger than the United States, China, India, and most of Europe combined. Let that sink in. But on most maps, Africa looks small, manageable, shrunk. On the Mercator projection, the one most people grew up with, Africa appears roughly equal in size to Greenland. But we already learned, Greenland is 14 times smaller. That's not a small mistake. That's global misrepresentation. Now look at the Peters projection, a more accurate map based on surface area. Suddenly Africa expands to its true size, and it dominates the map, just as it should. But the problem goes deeper than size. Africa is often shown as 1. Empty. 2. Dry. 3. Primitive. 4. Undeveloped, yet Africa is 1. Home to 1.4 billion people. 2. Filled with thousands of cultures, languages, and cities. 3. Rich in natural resources, history, and innovation. Maps rarely show this. Instead, Africa becomes a visual placeholder, a flat, featureless shape. Even in modern data visualizations, Africa is often left blank, gray, or oversimplified. Message it sends? That Africa is less populated, less important, less worthy of attention. But here's the truth. Africa is the cradle of humanity. It's the geographical center of the Earth's landmass. It's a continent with the youngest population, the fastest growing economies, and cities larger than many in the West. So why has it been minimized on maps? Partly technical, Mercator's distortion, but mostly political, a legacy of colonialism, where mapmakers from Europe saw Africa as a target for extraction, not a center of civilization. Even the choice to center the world map on Europe pushes Africa to the bottom or edge, visually and symbolically. The truth? Africa isn't on the edge of the world. It is the world, its past, its present, and its future. So when you look at a map that shrinks or flattens Africa, ask yourself, who drew this? And what were they trying to say? Because this isn't just bad cartography. It's a distortion of reality, and Africa deserves better. 4. Europe appears larger than it is. Europe is the cultural, political, and historical center of many world maps. It's where most Western education systems begin their geography lessons. It's placed at the center of the map, often highlighted, labeled in detail. It looks large, influential, and dominant. But here's the catch. Europe is much smaller than it appears. Let's look at the numbers. 1. Europe's total area, approximately 10 million square kilometers. 2. Africa's area, approximately 30 million square kilometers. 3. South America's area, approximately 17 million square kilometers. 4. Canada alone, approximately 9 million square kilometers, nearly the same as all of Europe. Yet, on many world maps, especially the Mercator projection, Europe looks bigger than South America, and not much smaller than Africa. That's pure distortion. It's also perception management. The Mercator projection stretches the north and compresses the south. And guess what continent sits entirely in the north? Europe. When we grew up looking at Europe, central, prominent, oversized, we weren't just seeing geography. We were seeing a visual message. But here's some perspective. 1. You can fit all of Europe inside Africa, with room to spare. 2. India alone is about 1/3 the size of Europe and has nearly twice the population. 3. Brazil is almost as large as Europe and often excluded from global center stage. Yet Europe dominates global map design, not just in scale, but in placement. Most Western maps put Europe in the middle, often cutting off the Pacific Ocean or distorting Asia to do it. This isn't a geographical necessity, it's a cartographic choice, a psychological trick. Because when you're in the center, everything else revolves around you. This is called Eurocentrism, and it doesn't just exist in textbooks, it's built into the maps themselves. Even modern digital platforms, like weather apps or flight maps, center Europe by default. It becomes the reference point for distance, importance, and location. But the Earth has no center. Every country, every continent is equally valid. So when we consistently show Europe as larger, central, and dominant, we reinforce centuries of colonial thinking. Europe has given the world many gifts: art, science, democracy. But it's not the center of the Earth, and it never was. It's time the map started reflecting that. 5. Countries missing from most maps. Most people assume that world maps are complete, that they show all countries, all borders, all names. But the truth is, some countries are missing. Let's start with the most famous example. Taiwan. It's a democratic island of over 23 million people. It has its own government, elections, economy, and even passports. By every practical measure, it's a functioning, independent country. Yet many world maps, especially those made in or for China, leave Taiwan out or listed as a province. Why? Because the Chinese government claims Taiwan as its territory, and companies that want to do business in China often comply with that demand. That includes publishers, airlines, and yes, even map makers. So a place with more people than Australia, Portugal, or the Netherlands is often erased from the map. But Taiwan isn't the only one. Some maps list Palestine. Others don't. It depends on who made the map and their political stance. Palestinian territories, like the West Bank and Gaza Strip, are heavily disputed, and their status is often shown as dotted lines, unlabeled zones, or completely excluded. Yet millions of people live there, and they're rarely visible on school maps. Kosovo declared independence from Serbia in 2008. Over 100 countries recognize it, including the US and most of Europe. But others, including Russia and China, don't. As a result, many global maps omit Kosovo entirely or show it as part of Serbia. Western Sahara, a large region in North Africa claimed by Morocco, but also home to an independence movement. Some maps show it as a country. Others erase it completely. So what does this tell us? That maps aren't just tools, they're political statements. When a country is left off, it sends a message. 1. You don't count. 2. Your existence is negotiable. 3. You're too controversial to show. This has real consequences. 1. It affects how people perceive legitimacy. 2. It shapes how children learn about the world. 3. It reinforces the idea that some lives are worth mapping, and others aren't. And it doesn't stop at countries. 1. Indigenous territories are almost never shown, rarely labeled, if ever. So next time you look at a world map, ask, what's not here? And why? Because silence on a map is never neutral. It's a choice. 6. The real size of Russia. Look at any standard world map, and one country jumps out immediately: Russia. It's huge. It stretches across nearly half of the northern hemisphere. From Europe to the Pacific, Russia seems to dominate the map. But is it really that big? Yes, but not as big as you think. Let's break it down. 1. Russia is the largest country in the world by land area. 2. It spans over 17 million square kilometers. 3. That's twice the size of the US and larger than Pluto. But here's the twist. On the Mercator map, Russia looks even larger than it actually is. Massively inflated. Why? Because of its position, far from the equator. As we've seen before, the Mercator projection stretches countries near the poles. And Russia is one of the most northern nations on Earth. That means the farther north you go, the more the map distorts and enlarges what you see. On a Mercator map, Russia appears. In reality, Africa is almost twice its size. But South America is larger than it looks, and has more population, biodiversity, and ecological diversity. Even parts of Russia that are mostly uninhabited, like Siberia, are made to look equal in importance to densely populated regions like Europe or India. This creates a visual bias. Russia seems 1. More powerful. 2. More dominant. 3. More central to global affairs. And while Russia is indeed a major player, the map exaggerates that perception. There's also another trick. Many maps center Europe, pushing Asia to the side. To keep Russia whole, cartographers stretch and compress space, distorting nearby countries like Japan, Mongolia, and China. Even Alaska, just across the Bering Strait, ends up twisted and detached, all to accommodate Russia's vast presence. But in more accurate projections, like the Gall-Peters or Winkel-Triple, Russia shrinks to a more realistic scale. Still big, still vast, but no longer the giant that swallows the world. So why do map makers keep showing it that way? Because perception is power. A larger-looking Russia. 1. Appears more threatening during wartime. 2. Feels more dominant in global politics. 3. reinforces old Cold War imagery. It's not just geography, it's narrative. Maps can make you feel like a place matters more than it does, or that it's always been powerful, even if it's mostly frozen tundra. So the next time you see Russia stretching across your wall map like a continent of its own, remember, it's big, but the map makes it even bigger, and bigger doesn't always mean more important. 7. The time zone illusion. Time zones seem like one of the most objective things on Earth. It's either 3 p.m. or it's not, right? But what if time itself is a political illusion? When you look at a world time zone map, you expect neat vertical lines dividing the Earth every 15 degrees of longitude. That's how it's supposed to work. But in reality, time zones are a chaotic, distorted mess, full of bends, jumps, and strange exceptions. Let's look closer. Example 1. China is nearly as wide as the entire United States. It should span at least 5 time zones. But it doesn't. All of China uses a single time zone, Beijing time, UTC plus 8. That means in some parts of Western China, the sun rises at 10 a.m. and sets at midnight. Why? Because the Chinese government wants to enforce national unity, symbolically and practically. It's not about geography, it's about power. Example 2. India, a massive, diverse country, also uses one time zone. It's called Indian Standard Time, and it's offset by plus 5:30. Yes, 30 minutes. Because India didn't want to align with British time zones or neighboring Pakistan. So it created its own version of time, quite literally. Example 3. Russia, on the other hand, has 11 time zones, one of the widest spans in the world. But even there, time zones shifted multiple times in recent years for political reasons, including under Putin's government. Weird time zone moments. 1. Nepal uses UTC plus 5:45, one of the only countries with a 45-minute offset. 2. North Korea invented its own time zone called Pyongyang time in 2015, then later abandoned it. 3. France has more time zones than any country because of its overseas territory, so what's the big deal? Time zones affect 1. Flights. 2. Communication. 3. Business. 4. Daily life, but more than that, they shape how we relate to space. When a country bends its time zone to match another, it signals alignment, political, economic, or cultural. When it creates its own time, it asserts independence. Even the international date line, which determines what day it is, zigzags like a snake, often for purely nationalistic reasons. For example, 1. The island nation of Kiribati moved the line eastward so it could be the first to enter the new millennium in 2000. Yes, they redrew time to make headlines. Time is supposed to be universal, but maps reveal how even time gets twisted by borders, history, and pride. So next time you look at a time zone map and see those messy curves and jumps, remember, you're not just looking at clocks, you're looking at politics in disguise. 8. The political color trick maps don't just show shapes, they show power, and one of the most subtle tools they use is color. You've seen it before. 1. Blue for allies. 2. Red for enemies. 3. Gray for unknown. 4. Black for fear. But where did these color choices come from? And what do they do to your brain? Let's start with a basic truth. Colors are not neutral. They carry emotional weight. They trigger associations, often without you realizing it. And in political maps, colors are rarely chosen randomly. Red equals sign. Enemy. During the Cold War, most Western maps used red to represent the Soviet Union and its allies. The implication was clear. 1. Red equals sign threat. 2. Red equals sign danger. 3. Red equals sign communism. Meanwhile, the US and Western Europe were shaded in blue or green. Calm, stable, trustworthy colors. This wasn't just for style. It was psychological warfare on paper. It made the world look like a battle between safe zones and danger zones. The Third World Color Code. Many maps colored developing nations in dull, faded, or even brown tones. This subtly suggested poverty, primitiveness, or even dirtiness. Meanwhile, developed nations were shown in vibrant, clean shades, even if those countries had lower biodiversity or resources. Again, the message was unspoken but clear. Changing the narrative even today, electoral maps are coded in ways that influence perception. In the US, 1. Red equals sign Republican. 2. Blue equals sign Democrat, but that wasn't always the case. Before 2000, the colors flipped depending on the network. It was only after the 2000 Bush versus Gore election that the red-blue divide became locked in. And it's not just America. Some countries use green for Islam, yellow for monarchy, black for anarchism, or white for neutrality. In every case, colors are chosen to tell a story. Why it matters. When you see a map that makes certain countries red, dark, or gray, your brain reacts differently than when you see light, pastel, or bright green. It affects 1. Who you trust. 2. Who you fear. 3. Who you think belongs on the world stage. And map makers, from governments to media outlets, have known this for decades. Colors create emotion. Emotion shapes belief. Belief drives behavior. All from a simple shade on a sheet of paper. So next time you see a political map, ask yourself, 1. Who chose these colors? 2. What are they trying to make me feel? 3. And what would this map look like in black and white? Because once you see the trick, you'll never unsee it. 9. Colonial echoes in modern maps were never just about geography. They were about power and control. Throughout history, maps were tools not only to understand the world, but to claim it. Let's rewind to the age of exploration, the 15th to 19th centuries. European empires began charting the globe, sending ships across unknown oceans. And with every new discovery came a new map, one that didn't just show land, but redrew ownership. Drawing lines =, taking land colonial powers used maps to 1. Divide Africa. 2. Slice up Asia. 3. Carve out the Middle East. 4. Redefine borders in Latin America. Often, these borders were drawn with rulers, not with understanding. They ignored 1. Mountains. 2. Rivers. 3. Tribes. 4. Languages. 5. Cultures. The result, artificial borders that caused conflict, division, and war. Effects that still exist today. The blank spaces. Many early European maps showed large parts of Africa, the Americas, or Oceania as blank or unexplored. The implication? Even when civilizations were thriving, like in West Africa, South Asia, or the Pacific Islands, they were rendered invisible until discovered. Maps turned rich cultures into empty land, ready for conquest. The language of control colonial maps used 1. European place names. 2. Latin script only. 3. Imperial flags and borders even. After decolonization, many countries still use maps that reflect the colonizers' version of the world. The names stuck. The borders stayed. And so did the psychology. Maps still often reflect a world defined by who drew them, not by who lived there. Why it still matters. Even in modern textbooks, global maps often 1. Center Europe. 2. Minimize indigenous regions. 3. Highlight former colonial powers in brighter, more detailed forms. They may look neutral, but they carry the echoes of empire. The map on your classroom wall may not show a crown or flag, but it's still shaped by a time when empires ruled with pens and ink. And unless we actively question that history, we risk inheriting its lies. So next time you look at a border, a name, or a shaded region on a map, ask, because maps don't just reflect the world, they build it. 10. The map that should replace them. All after everything we've explored, from distorted sizes to missing nations, from color-coded politics to colonial borders, one question remains: is there a map that gets it right? The answer is, not perfectly, but some maps get us much closer to the truth. Let's start with one of the most powerful alternatives, the Gaull-Peters. Projection, unlike the Mercator map, which distorts size, the Gaull-Peters projection preserves area accuracy. That means 1. Africa looks massive, as it truly is. 2. South America regains its real proportions. 3. Greenland finally shrinks down to scale. The first time many people see the Gaull-Peters map, they say, it challenges everything we subconsciously learned about importance, centrality, and scale. The Winkel-Triple projection, another solid option, is the Winkel-Triple. It's a compromise between size, shape, and distance. Many modern atlases and educational institutions now use this projection, including National Geographic. It minimizes distortion without putting any one region at the visual center of the world. No continent is exaggerated. No nation is hidden. It reflects a world that's balanced, not biased. But here's the bigger idea. No map is perfect, because all maps are distortions of a 3D globe on a flat surface. But what we choose to distort says everything about what we value. 1. Do we value accuracy? 2. Do we value equality? 3. Or do we cling to maps that make us feel comfortable even if they lie? The map we choose shapes 1. What we teach. 2. What we believe. 3. How we see each other. So maybe it's time to stop asking, because maps don't just guide us across land. They guide us across ideas, and if we change the map, we might just change the way we see the world. You grew up trusting maps. They were in your textbooks, your classrooms, on the walls of every school you entered. They felt neutral, scientific. True, but now you know, maps are not just facts. They are narratives. They tell a story, and sometimes that story is wrong. They have 1. Erased nations. 2. Distorted continents. 3. Elevated power. 4. Minimized truth, and most of us never questioned them until now. This isn't just about geography. It's about how we see each other, who we center, who we shrink, who we ignore. So the next time you look at a map, ask yourself, because truth doesn't just live in books. Sometimes it's hidden in the margins of a map. This is lesson lost, and you've just unlearned the world. Call to action. Final sound pictory icin. What's the biggest map lie that shocked you today? Drop it in the comments. We're reading all of them. Like this video if you'll never look at maps the same way again. Subscribe for more forgotten truths that school didn't teach you.